Hello everyone, so today we are going to assemble an FPV 5-inch racing drone. So to start with, I'm going to show you first the materials that we'll be using because we'll be assembling the drone from square one. Right, let's start with the frame. This is made up of carbon fiber. It has holes already for the boards that we'll be using. So this is a 30 by 30 hole that we'll be using for our flight control. Next is our motors. So this is a Race Master and it is a GTS 2305 and 2400 kV. So I have 4 motors here that we'll be using. Alright, next is our flight controller or FC together with the ESC or electronic speed controller. So this brand is PDB because I don't want to use Betaflight using a laptop. Instead, this will be user friendly for those beginners who are using phones to configure their drones. So we have here your ESC and your flight controller. Okay, so I'll be showing to you that later. Next is our camera. So we have here a run cam camera. This will be used for our FPV or first person view camera for our video transmission. And we are going to connect this camera to our VTX or video transmitter together with its antenna right here. Okay, so I'm going to show you later on how to assemble them. Next is our receiver. I got here an Express LRS receiver because I'll be using a radio transmitter ELRS. Okay, and the last one is your Nazgul propellers. So they are 5-inch propellers that we'll be using. And lastly, your strap for your battery. Okay, so these are the materials we'll be using. I'll be presenting to you how to assemble them step by step, and we're gonna test fly them today. Alright, now that we are done installing your motors in your frame, we are going to install your FC and ESC. Your FC is your flight controller and your ESC is your electronic speed controller. So this is your ESC, and you're gonna need to put this first on your frame because you're going to solder the motors here on these terminals. Okay, so I'm going to show it to you later. And after you install your ESC on your flight control on your frame, we are going to put also your flight controller on top. Okay, so to do this, we need to put the screws that are brought together from your ESC. So these are long screws. So you're going to mount this on your frame. There you go. So 4 of them. That's 1 already. 2, 3, and 4. There you go. Alright, so as you can see, there are 4 screws there, long ones that are going to be used to mount your stack. Right? So your flight controller and ESC comes with your capacitor. This is 1000 microfarad. It comes with the cable connectors, your nuts and your screw, and your power cable, which is XT60. This will be your power source from your battery. This will be your terminal, and this will be connected to your ESC. So red is for positive and black is your negative. Right. So I'm going to solder them later on. Alright, so now that we installed your screws, let's put on your ESC first. Okay, so just mount it on the screw. Here we go. Here's your ESC. Okay. So I'm going to show you how to solder these ones. As you can see, there are 3 cables here on your motors, right? Every motor has 3 cables. So these 3 cables will be soldered on these 6 terminals. So this will be 1, 2, 3 terminals. This will be motor 1, the first 3 right here. And this terminal here, 1, 2, 3, will be motor 2. This will also be the same with your motor 3. So motor 3 will be installed here, 1, 2, 3, and motor 4 will be installed on this part, 1, 2, 3. So each 3 cables has corresponding terminals. Now we are going to put some little flux on these terminals, and I'm going to pre-solder them. I'm going to put some lead on them so that it will be easier for us to mount or solder our cables. Alright, so now that we're done putting some flux on your terminals on your ESC, so each of these terminals I put some flux, little flux only. Okay, so we're going to solder them, solder some or pre-solder some lead so that it will be easier for us to install your cable for your motors. Alright, so let's try this one. Some of that. Alright, so as you can see, I pre-soldered already the terminals, so that will be easier for us to solder your motor cables. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. Alright, last one. There you go. Start with a little lead so that when you solder them in the terminals, they are going to connect. There you go. That's good. Alright, so let's solder them on your terminals. So this is your motor 1. Here we go. Then for your second cable right here. There we go. And for the third cable. There we go. Alright. So the technique on soldering your capacitor is find this symbol. So you can see the same symbol here is negative. So it means this side here will be negative. So I'm going to cut a little portion of this capacitor so that it will be easy for us to install our power cable. Okay. Alright, so now that we are ready to install our capacitor to your board, so I cut a little bit of extra on it, then bend it like this, so that we're just gonna insert it on the hole right there. Here we go. Now, I put a little bit of flux on each of these open wires for your power cable. Then let's put some little bit of lead on it. Here we go. Next. There we go. All right, I think that's enough. Okay. Then let's solder our power cable. So as you can see, this is where your power cable goes. This is your negative. Alright, next is your positive. Okay. Alright guys, now that I connected this cable for your terminal right there, we're going to connect this other side on your flight controller. So for your flight controller, since our drone will be facing on this direction, as you can see, there's an arrow there on your drone that tells you the direction of your head. So we're going to install it like this. Okay. Then after we install it, we're going to connect this cable on your flight controller right there. Okay. Alright, now that you successfully connected your cable connector for your flight controller and your ESC below, this will be the appearance of it. And we are going to later on put on the top your video transmitter. But before that, we are going to solder your receiver and solder also your camera and your video transmitter. This one. So we're going to mount it on that part. But before that, we're going to put some rubber rings on it so that it will serve as an insulator. So it's some electronic parts of the video transmitter, your VDX, and your ESC will not touch each other to create short circuit. Okay, so this will be for the safety of your ESC and your flight controller and your video transmitter. Okay, so for this one, I'm going to cut the cable for this because we're going to solder it on these terminals. So this video transmitter is 7 up to 24 volts power input, and it will gonna have a 5 volts output on this part. Okay, alright guys, so base of the diagram, I soldered this camera and receiver and the VTX on your flight controller. So I started first with the camera, which is 5 volts, ground, and VTX. Next is the receiver. This is the Express LRS receiver. So 5 volts, ground, RX2 and TX2. And the last that I soldered is the video transmitter. So since this is 7 volts to 24 volts power supply, I soldered it to your 9 volts right there. Okay, and next is ground. Next, the yellow one is the VTX. So I just folded this white one. Right, now I'm going to attach the antenna for your VTX, and we're gonna try testing it, powering on with a battery. So I'll be using a 4S battery and test it. Okay. Alright guys, so moment of truth. I'm almost done connecting all the camera, the receiver, and the video transmitter VTX, and I made sure that the receiver has its antenna connected on it. At the same time, your VTX, I made sure that the antenna is also connected because I don't want to destroy them while powering on. So almost all is ready. I'm going to use a 4S battery first to connect with our battery connector. So everything is ready. Let's do this. Alright, so as you can see, the receiver is blinking. It's looking for the signal for the radio transmitter. So I'm going to bind this one later. And as you can see, the VTX is also having power and it's blinking red. It's looking for my goggles. Now the receiver is entering Wi-Fi mode. It's blinking fast. And flight controller has 4 LED lights. It means it's full battery. Each one represents 25%, so it's now 100%. Alright, so let's bind this on my remote and let's check each motors on my SpeedyB app that I'm going to use with my phone. Thank you very much. Ethan, this is for you. Right guys, now that we are done assembling my drone, I finished binding it in my receiver as well as in my goggles that have an analog module. So let's test flight it.